Hello, Ross Madden here. Thanks for joining me. Welcome to the show. Today we're talking about gold versus the dollar. It's a very important topic because the dollar is what most of us take our savings in. If you take a paycheck, you put it in the bank, it's in dollars. If you buy stocks, they're valued in dollars. So most of what we save is valued in dollars. Gold is also a very important topic. We've heard online economists warning us that our economy is in a fragile shape, that an interest rate spike could lead to a popping of our bubbled economy. And we've got multiple bubbles. We've got a car bubble, a housing bubble, student loan bubble, stock bubble, and they're all really based on a dollar bubble, where the United States has gotten this international respect as the petrodollar, the world reserve currency. Everyone around the world has been forced to buy and sell oil for dollars. And that is coming to an end as China and Russia look to trade their oil for yuan and rubles. On top of that, both Russia and China have been amassing massive gold supplies, and Russia has even been showing people into their vaults and letting people count their gold. Not only do they have a massive amount of gold, where they have recently overtaken China in gold supply. That comes as a result of China leveling off their purchases of gold back in July of 2016. Meanwhile, Russia has continued ramping up their purchases. And it looks like these bars of gold are held in these metal containers. Those are beautiful bars of gold. That's a nice looking marking. Why do we never weigh out our gold like this? Why is there never a gold audit of the Federal Reserve? Why is there never a gold audit of Fort Knox? It looks like the silver is just being stacked up in the middle of the room. Holy crap, that's a lot of silver just stacked in the middle of the room. Fort Knox does not do tours or audits of their gold reserves. In fact, an audit has not been performed since 1958. But we claim to have more than twice as much gold as the next largest gold holder, Germany. And Germany recently decided to repatriate its gold from Paris, France, and New York. It repatriated all of its gold from Paris and a third of its reserves from the US. And a third grader's math education can go ahead and see that that is propaganda right there. This article says that the Federal Reserve returned 300 tons to Frankfurt and still holds 1,236 tons in New York. So the Federal Reserve returned less than 20% of Germany's gold held in New York, but they called it a third, and so now less than a fifth is equivalent to a third. Better hope that German education is just as bad as the Baltimore education. During the Cold War, Germany split their gold between the United States, the UK, and Paris in order to protect their gold from being taken by the Russians, but now they are wisely asking for it to be repatriated and sent back to Germany. They had a goal of repatriating half of their gold back to German banks by 2020, and they achieved that goal 3 years ahead of time, just last year. So China's amassing gold, Russia is showing off their gold, and Germany's asking for their gold back. Meanwhile, the United States is hiding their gold, hasn't shown anybody their gold, but Steve Mnuchin, our Treasury Secretary, visited Fort Knox earlier in 2017. People were pretty upset with his response to the experience. He was quoted joking about it, saying, "I assume the gold is still there. It would be quite a movie if we walked in and there was no gold." But that's exactly what was alleged all the way back in the 1970s. I'm just going to read this. In the 1970s, a very courageous gentleman named Edward Durrell claimed that substantially all of the US gold reserves being stored at Fort Knox was gone. Only 1,000 tons or so of the 8,500 tons supposedly being stored there remained. The rest had been secretly taken from Fort Knox and shipped to London in 1967 and early 1968 for sale by President Johnson in an ill-fated attempt to keep the price of gold at $35 per ounce. Mr. Durrell provided a lot of anecdotal evidence to support this claim. These included eyewitness accounts of hundreds of army trucks leaving Fort Knox in the middle of the night over a period of many weeks, supposedly loaded with gold bounty. Other interesting but circumstantial evidence was the sudden and unexpected dismissal of Gordon Tether, business editor from London's Financial Times, who published Mr. Durrell's claims. To my knowledge, no mainstream U.S. newspaper dared to publish Mr. Durrell's allegations. He was originally inspired to study this Fort Knox gold issue after an explosive report called No Gold Left in Fort Knox, where Louise Bauer was an unnamed source. She was an executive assistant for the former governor Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller. 3 days after the National Tatler published that report, she leapt to her death from her 10th floor apartment. Well, that suggests foul play, that suggests cover-up. I guess they really don't want any evidence of the lack of gold in Fort Knox escaping, which means that's probably exactly what we should be looking at. We should probably audit Fort Knox, and I bet if you wanted to audit the Fed, if you wanted to end the Fed, you first need to audit the Fed. If you want to audit the Fed, you first need to audit Fort Knox. Show that we don't have the credibility on the world stage when it comes to our financial institutions. We already have reports going back to the 70s that question our gold supply at Fort Knox. We haven't audited the Fort Knox gold supply since the 50s. It's time that we look at our gold reserves and see if we really have what we say we have. 8,500 tons of gold is a whole lot. And I think Russia showing off their gold reserves is them goading us to show off our gold reserves, which I don't think we have what we say we have. And that's actually going to do it for the report today. This has been Ross Madden. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you visit my website. That's exposethedeepstate.com, where I expose the deep state actors one at a time. It's like the Wikipedia of the deep state. Feel free to donate to my cause, to these reports. Keep them coming, and have a great day.
What our major indicator that we are watching closely that is going to determine where the markets are going. It's the signal. It's a signal that when it flashes, you will know whether to bail out or stay in. And that's gold prices.
Whoa.